You are exhausted because you keep asking the wrong people to confirm your worth. You wait for the reply, the compliment, the approval, the invitation, the little sign that says you still matter. And when it does not come, something inside you shrinks. That is not love. That is dependence. There is a version of you that still changes itself to be accepted. It laughs when it wants to be silent. It agrees when it wants to disagree. It stays small because being disliked feels too dangerous. And slowly, without noticing, you stop living by character and start living by permission. Stoicism asks you to destroy that version. Not the kind part of you, not the loving part. The weak part that keeps handing your confidence to other people's reactions. Because the moment your worth depends on approval, anyone who can give it can control you. But the moment you build your life on character, you become free, even when they do not clap, even when they misunderstand, even when they do not choose you. This is where the old version of you ends. Let's begin. Before we go deeper, if this message speaks to a part of you that is tired of begging for approval, stay with this episode until the end. And if this kind of stoic work is helping you rebuild yourself, subscribe to the channel and share this with someone who needs to stop living by permission. The need for approval rarely looks like a prison at first. It looks like being polite. It looks like being easy to deal with. It looks like keeping the peace, reading the room, avoiding conflict, and making sure no one is disappointed in you. You tell yourself you are just being considerate. You tell yourself you are just being mature. But deep down, you know there are moments when you are not choosing kindness. You are choosing fear. You say yes when your whole body wants to say no. You laugh when the joke makes you uncomfortable. You agree with opinions you do not believe. You stay in conversations where your values are being stepped on because the thought of being disliked feels heavier than the pain of betraying yourself. And slowly, approval becomes the invisible hand that shapes your behavior. No one has to command you. You command yourself on their behalf. That is the quiet prison. You start living as if every room is a test. Every face becomes a mirror. Every silence becomes a verdict. Every delayed reply becomes evidence. You begin to ask, did I say too much? Did I sound strange? Did they like me? Did I disappoint them? Did they think less of me? And before you know it, your mind is no longer a place of command. It is a courtroom where other people's reactions keep judging your worth. This is exhausting because you are trying to control something that was never yours to control. You cannot control how people interpret you. You cannot control whether they like your choices. You cannot control whether they approve of your growth, your boundaries, your silence, your ambition, your personality, or your way of living. But the approval-seeking version of you keeps trying anyway. It believes that if it can just become acceptable enough, careful enough, useful enough, agreeable enough, then rejection will never touch it. But rejection still comes, misunderstanding still comes, criticism still comes. And when it comes, the person who lives for approval collapses faster than the person who lives by character, because approval was never a foundation. It was weather. It changes with moods, opinions, environments, and expectations. One day they praise you. The next day they ignore you. One day they admire your discipline. The next day they call you distant. One day they like the version of you that serves them. The next day they resist the version of you that respects itself. If your identity depends on that, you will never be steady. The Stoic path begins with a hard question. Who are you when no one is approving of you? Not when everyone understands. Not when the room claps. Not when the message comes. Not when they validate your decision. Who are you when you are misunderstood, unseen, criticized, or left alone with only your own conscience? That is where character is revealed. Not in applause, but in the silence after applause disappears. A person ruled by approval becomes easy to bend. He does not need chains because he already fears disapproval more than self-betrayal. He will adjust his truth to stay liked. He will soften his boundaries to stay chosen. He will hide his standards to avoid tension. He will become whatever the room rewards, then wonder why he feels empty when he is finally alone. Here is the practical rule. Notice the moments where you abandon yourself to manage someone else's opinion. Notice when your yes is really fear. Notice when your silence is not wisdom, but the terror of being judged. Notice when you change your words, not because they are unkind, but because honesty might cost you approval. These moments matter because this is where the old version of you survives. You do not destroy that version through anger. You destroy it through honesty. You begin saying, I would rather be respected by myself than approved by someone I had to become false to please. You begin choosing the clean discomfort of truth over the poisoned comfort of acceptance. You begin to understand that being liked at the cost of your character is not connection. It is quiet self-abandonment. Approval is not evil. It feels good to be appreciated. It feels human to want warmth, recognition, and acceptance. But the danger begins when approval becomes oxygen, when you cannot act without it, when you cannot stand without it. When one person's reaction can decide whether you feel worthy for the rest of the day, that is the prison you are here to leave, not by becoming harsh, not by rejecting people, not by pretending you do not care about anyone, but by building a self that can care without being controlled, love without begging, listen without surrendering, and stand without needing the room to agree. And once approval becomes oxygen, the next danger appears. What comforts you for a moment can also weaken you over time. Approval feels good because it gives you relief. Someone praises you, and for a moment the doubt becomes quiet. Someone chooses you, and for a moment the fear of being unwanted disappears. Someone compliments your work, your appearance, your personality, or your choices, and suddenly you feel lighter. You feel seen. You feel confirmed. You feel as if the world has handed you evidence that you are enough. There is nothing wrong with enjoying that. You are human. It is natural to appreciate encouragement. It is natural to feel warmth when people recognize your effort. The problem begins when approval stops being encouragement and becomes your emotional fuel, when you cannot move without it, when you cannot decide without it, when your confidence rises only when someone claps and falls the moment they look away. That is where approval becomes dangerous, because approval is temporary by nature. It comes and goes. People approve of you when your choices serve their expectations. They approve of your discipline until your discipline makes you less available. They approve of your kindness until your kindness develops boundaries. They approve of your ambition until it makes them uncomfortable. They approve of your honesty until your honesty refuses to flatter them. If your strength depends on their approval, then your strength will keep disappearing every time their mood changes. This is why needing approval makes you weaker. It teaches your mind to wait for permission before trusting itself. You begin to ask, will they like this? Before asking, is this right? You ask, will this impress them? Before asking, does this align with my values? You ask, will they still accept me? Before asking, can I still respect myself if I do this? Slowly, the outside voice becomes louder than the inner one. And the more you depend on that outside voice, the less you train your own judgment. A person who needs approval too much does not become more confident. He becomes more dependent. Every compliment becomes medicine. Every silence becomes withdrawal. Every criticism becomes a threat. Every lack of attention becomes a private collapse. This is not strength. This is living with your worth attached to other people's reactions. Think of how subtle it can be. You post something, then keep checking who liked it. You say something honest, then spend the rest of the day wondering if it made you look strange. You make a decision, then feel uneasy until someone validates it. You work hard, not because the work matters to you, but because you need someone to say, I am proud of you. And if no one says it, the work suddenly feels less valuable. That is the weakness approval creates. It makes your inner state dependent on an outside signal. The Stoic does not reject praise. He simply refuses to build his house on it. He understands that praise can be pleasant, but it cannot be the foundation. The foundation must be character, effort, discipline, honesty, courage, the ability to do what is right even when no one recognizes it, the ability to continue even when no one claps, the ability to look at your own actions and know they were aligned, even if the world stayed silent. Here is the practical rule: enjoy approval, but do not need it to stand. When someone praises you, receive it with humility, but do not let it become your identity. When someone ignores you, do not let their silence erase the value of what you did. When someone criticizes you, examine it if it contains truth, but do not let it become a verdict on your worth. Approval can visit your life, but it must never become the owner of your life. You will know you are still dependent on approval when your mood changes too quickly because of other people's reactions. One compliment makes you feel powerful. One cold response makes you feel worthless. One invitation makes you feel chosen. One exclusion makes you question your entire value. That instability is not emotional depth. It is a sign that your center is outside you. And when your center is outside you, anyone can move it. This is why the version of you that needs approval must be destroyed, not with hatred, but with discipline. You destroy it every time you do the right thing without announcing it. Every time you keep a promise to yourself without needing applause. Every time you choose what is honest over what is impressive. Every time you let someone misunderstand you without immediately running to repair your image. Every time you say, "I would rather be steady than praised." Approval feels comforting because it gives you a quick sense of belonging. But if you depend on it, it makes you fragile. It gives you a warm moment, then leaves you colder when it disappears. Character is slower. It does not always give you applause. It does not always make you popular. But it gives you something approval can never give: a self that remains standing when no one is cheering. If this is already making you think of the places where you have been living for approval, do not ignore that discomfort. Write one place in the comments where you need to stop asking for permission, and keep watching, because the deeper fear behind this habit is where the real work begins. Behind the need for approval, there is usually a fear you have not fully faced. It is not just that you want people to like you. It is that you are afraid of what it might mean if they do not. You are afraid that if they reject you, it proves you are not enough. You are afraid that if they misunderstand you, their version of you will become stronger than the truth. You are afraid that if they stop clapping, stop calling, stop choosing, or stop noticing, something about your value disappears with them. This is why validation can become so addictive. It does not only feel good, it soothes fear. It tells the insecure part of you, you are safe now, you are accepted now, you still belong. But the relief never lasts because the fear underneath was never healed. It was only quieted for a moment. So you need another sign, another compliment, another reply, another person to make you feel real again. And slowly, your emotional life becomes a constant search for proof. Proof that you matter. Proof that you are attractive enough. Proof that you are talented enough. Proof that you are not forgotten. Proof that you are not replaceable. Proof that you are still wanted. But listen carefully. A life built on constant proof is not peace. It is fear wearing a better outfit. The hidden fear says, if I am disliked, I am unsafe. So you become agreeable. The hidden fear says, if I am misunderstood, I must explain immediately. So you exhaust yourself trying to control every interpretation. The hidden fear says, if I disappoint them, I will be abandoned. So you betray your own needs to keep them comfortable. The hidden fear says, if they do not notice me, I have no value. so you start performing instead of living. This fear often begins quietly. Maybe you were praised only when you performed well. Maybe love felt conditional. Maybe you learned early that being easy, useful, successful, attractive, funny, or agreeable earned you attention. Maybe you were judged harshly when you expressed your real thoughts. Maybe rejection left a mark, and now a part of you believes that approval is protection. So you do not just want to be liked. You feel like you need to be liked in order to stay emotionally safe. But the Stoic path asks you to grow beyond emotional childhood. Not by becoming hard, but by becoming honest. You must ask, what am I really afraid will happen if they do not approve of me? Are you afraid of being alone? Are you afraid of being seen clearly? Are you afraid of losing your image? Are you afraid that without applause, you will have to face the emptiness you have been covering with attention? This question is uncomfortable, but it is necessary, because until you name the fear will keep naming your choices. You will call it kindness when it is fear. You will call it loyalty when it is fear. You will call it humility when it is fear. You will call it peacekeeping when it is fear. But deep inside, you will know the truth. You were not acting from character. You were acting from the terror of losing approval. There is a difference between wanting connection and needing validation. Connection is human. Validation becomes dangerous when it decides your identity. Connection says, I value your presence. Validation says, without your approval, I do not know who I am. Connection allows love. Validation creates dependence. Connection can survive honesty. Validation often demands performance. The Stoic does not run from rejection as if it is death. He studies it. He asks what rejection can actually take from him. Can it take his character? No. Can it take his discipline? No. Can it take his honesty, courage, patience, or self-respect? Not unless he gives those things away in response. Someone can dislike you, but they cannot make you false unless you choose falseness to avoid their dislike. Someone can misunderstand you, but they cannot corrupt your character unless you start living only to correct their opinion. Here is the practical rule. When you feel the hunger for validation, do not obey it immediately. Examine it. Ask, what fear is speaking right now? If you want to post only to be praised, ask what emptiness you are trying to cover. If you want to explain yourself for the 10th time, ask what rejection you are trying to prevent. If you want to change your decision just because someone disapproved, ask whether your values changed or your fears simply got louder. This does not mean you ignore all feedback. Wise people listen. Mature people reflect. Sometimes criticism contains truth. Sometimes someone's disapproval may reveal a blind spot. But there is a difference between examining feedback and kneeling before it. You can listen without surrendering your center. You can learn without letting another person become the owner of your worth. You will not become free by making everyone approve of you. That mission has no end. There will always be someone who does not understand your path, someone who dislikes your boundaries, someone who thinks your quiet is arrogance, someone who thinks your ambition is too much, someone who thinks your change is a threat. If your peace requires universal approval, your peace will never begin. Freedom begins when you can feel the fear of being disliked and still choose what is true. It begins when you can feel the discomfort of being misunderstood and still remain steady. It begins when you can stand in the absence of applause and not collapse into self-doubt. This is not easy. But every time you tolerate that discomfort without betraying yourself, the old fear loses strength. The version of you that needs validation is not evil. It is wounded. It is afraid. It learned to survive by becoming acceptable. But survival is not the same as freedom. At some point, you must stop letting fear dress itself as wisdom. You must stop confusing approval with safety. You must stop treating rejection as proof that you have no value. Your worth is not waiting inside someone else's reaction. It is not hidden in their praise, their invitation, their reply, or their acceptance. The fear behind validation says, if they do not choose me, I disappear. Character says, even when they do not choose me, I remain. And that is the beginning of a self that no longer begs the world to confirm its existence. But fear does not only make you hungry for approval, it also makes you easier to control. The person who needs approval can be controlled without being touched. No one has to threaten him. No one has to lock him in a room. No one has to shout orders. All they have to do is give approval when he behaves the way they like, and withdraw it when he becomes too honest, too independent, too firm, or too difficult to use. That is how subtle control works. If someone knows you need their praise, they can train your behavior with it. They reward the version of you that serves them. They smile when you agree. They become warm when you are useful. They approve when you stay small, silent, available, and easy. Then, the moment you set a boundary, speak truth, or choose yourself, their warmth disappears. Suddenly, they become cold. They call you selfish. They act disappointed. They make you feel as if you have done something wrong, not because your choice was wrong, but because your freedom no longer benefits them. And if you are addicted to their approval, you will start correcting yourself to recover the warmth. You will soften the boundary. You will explain too much. You will apologize for having needs. You will return to the old role because being approved feels safer than being free. This is why approval seeking is dangerous. It does not only make you insecure, it makes you programmable. Anyone who controls what you are hungry for can influence where you go. If you are hungry for praise, people can lead you with compliments. If you are hungry for acceptance, they can lead you with inclusion. If you are hungry for admiration, they can lead you with attention. If you are hungry for being needed, they can keep you trapped by making you feel responsible for their comfort. You may think you are choosing freely, but much of your behavior may be built around one secret question. What will make them approve of me? This is not freedom. This is emotional dependence with better manners. Think about the person who cannot say no because they are afraid of disappointing others. They may look kind from the outside, but inside they are controlled by the fear of losing approval. Think about the person who changes opinions in every group because they cannot tolerate disagreement. They may look flexible, but inside they are controlled by the need to be liked. Think about the person who stays in a relationship, friendship, job, or social circle that drains them because leaving would make people judge them. They may look loyal, but inside they are controlled by image. The approval-seeking version of you does not ask what is right. It asks, what will keep me accepted? That question is the beginning of weakness. A strong life cannot be built on the need to please every person who has access to your emotions. Some people will use your hunger against you. They will praise you when you make yourself convenient and punish you emotionally when you become self-respecting. They will call you mature when you tolerate too much, then call you difficult when you finally stop. They will admire your kindness when it serves them, then criticize your boundaries when your kindness develops a spine. That is why you must learn the difference between love and control. Love does not require you to abandon your values to stay accepted. Real respect does not disappear the moment you become honest. Healthy people may disagree with you, but they do not need you to betray yourself to keep their approval. Control, however, often comes disguised as disappointment. It says, I thought you were different, when what it means is, I thought you were easier to manage. The Stoic understands that the crowd can be a dangerous master. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself not to live as if he had 10,000 years, and not to be pulled apart by the opinions of others. His focus was not applause. His focus was character. Because once your life is ruled by outside approval, you become divided. One part of you wants truth. Another part wants acceptance. One part wants freedom. Another part wants to be chosen. One part knows the right thing. Another part asks whether people will still like you after you do it. This division weakens you. Here is the practical rule. When you feel pulled to please, ask, what would I choose if approval were not available? Not if people praised you. Not if they understood. Not if they clapped. What would you choose if no one approved, no one noticed, and no one made you feel special for doing it? That question reveals whether you are acting from values or from hunger. If you would tell the truth only when it is praised, your truth is not free. If you would set the boundary only when people understand it, your boundary is not strong. If you would pursue the goal only when others admire it, your ambition is borrowed. If you would be yourself only in rooms where it is rewarded, your identity is still under negotiation. This does not mean you should ignore people completely. Wise people listen, they learn, they accept correction. They can be influenced by truth, wisdom, and love, but they are not controlled by the fear of losing approval. There is a difference between being teachable and being owned. A teachable person changes when something is true. An approval-seeking person changes when someone is displeased. That difference matters. You become harder to control when you stop treating approval as a necessity. You can still appreciate kindness, but you do not collapse without it. You can still enjoy praise, but you do not chase it. You can still listen to criticism, but you do not let it decide your worth. You can still love people, but you do not make their emotional comfort the ruler of your character. The version of you that needs approval will always be easy to move. Give it praise and it leans forward. Withdraw praise and it panics. Offer acceptance and it obeys. Threaten rejection and it abandons itself. That version must be destroyed, not because it is evil, but because it is not free. A free person can stand in front of disappointment without surrendering his values. A free person can be disliked without becoming false. A free person can lose approval and still keep his center. That is the strength you are building. Not the strength to be admired, but the strength to remain yourself when admiration is not offered. If this episode is helping you see the pattern more clearly, do one thing now. Subscribe before you forget. Because the goal here is not motivation for one night. The goal is repeated training, repeated reminders, and a stronger self built over time. And as you begin to separate yourself from approval, you have to understand another distinction that most people never learn. Approval and respect are not the same thing, but many people spend their whole lives confusing them. Approval often comes when you make people comfortable. Respect comes when you remain consistent, even when comfort is not guaranteed. Approval can be won by pleasing the room. Respect is earned by living from character. Approval may smile at you when you say what people want to hear. Respect remains when you say what is true without becoming cruel, weak, or false. This difference matters because the approval-seeking version of you will often choose the easier reward. It wants the quick warmth. It wants the nod, the smile, the invitation, the message, the sense that everyone is still pleased. So it says what keeps the peace, avoids what creates tension, hides what may be judged, and becomes smaller when honesty might cost acceptance. It receives approval, but loses respect, sometimes from others, but more dangerously from itself. You can be approved and still not be respected. People may approve of you because you never challenge them, because you are always available, because you never say no, because you absorb disrespect quietly, because you make their life easier while making your own soul heavier. They may call you kind, mature, easy, loyal, humble, or understanding, but what they really mean is that you are convenient. That kind of approval is not love. It is a reward for self-erasure. Respect feels different. Respect does not always feel warm in the beginning. Sometimes respect creates discomfort because it introduces a boundary. It says, I care about you, but I will not betray myself to keep you comfortable. It says, I can listen, but I will not pretend to agree. It says, I can love you, but I will not become false to be chosen by you. Some people may not approve of that, but deep down, even if they resist it, they can feel that you are no longer for sale. A person who lives for approval asks, do they like me right now? A person who lives for respect asks, can I respect myself after this? That one question changes everything. It changes the way you speak. It changes the way you choose friends. It changes the way you handle criticism. It changes the way you show up in rooms where people expect you to shrink. It forces you to measure your life by something deeper than immediate emotional reward. Think about the person who always agrees just to be liked. People may approve of him because he is pleasant, but they may not respect him because his words have no weight. Think about the person who apologizes every time someone is displeased, even when he did nothing wrong. People may approve of his softness, but they may not respect him because they can feel he is negotiating with fear. Think about the person who changes his personality depending on who is watching. He may be accepted in many rooms, but he belongs deeply in none of them because no one is meeting the real person. This is why approval can become a poor substitute for respect. Approval asks you to adapt to desire. Respect asks you to align with principle. Approval says, become what they reward. Respect says, become what your conscience can stand beside. Approval may protect your image for a moment. Respect protects your identity over time. The Stoic life is built on this distinction. Marcus Aurelius wrote, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. That is not the language of approval. That is the language of character. He did not say, if they like it, do it. He did not say, if it makes you admired, say it. He pointed to a harder standard, right action and true speech. Because a person who is guided by what is right becomes steady. A person guided by what is approved becomes unstable. Here is the practical rule. When you feel the pull to please, ask, am I trying to be approved, or am I acting in a way that deserves respect? If you are about to say yes, ask whether the yes is honest. If you are about to stay silent, ask whether the silence is wisdom or fear. If you are about to change your decision, ask whether new truth appeared or whether someone's disappointment simply scared you. This is how you begin separating character from performance. This does not mean you become difficult for no reason. Some people misunderstand self-respect and turn it into stubbornness. That is not the goal. A mature person can cooperate. He can apologize when he is wrong. He can adjust when wisdom requires it. He can care about the feelings of others without being ruled by them. The difference is that he does not make approval the highest law. He can bend for truth, but he does not bend for manipulation. He can listen to correction, but he does not surrender his conscience just to remain liked. You must also understand that respect often arrives later than approval. Approval may come immediately when you please someone. Respect may come after people realize you cannot be pressured into falsehood. Approval may clap today. Respect may grow slowly as your actions prove that your values are not decoration. This is why the approval-seeking version of you struggles. It wants fast comfort. But character is built through delayed reward. It asks you to tolerate the discomfort of not being instantly liked so you can become someone who is deeply trusted. And sometimes the first person whose respect you must recover is yourself. You know the feeling after betraying yourself for approval. You get the smile, the peace, the acceptance, but something inside you feels smaller. You know you did not act from truth. You know you softened something that should have stood firm. You know you traded your inner respect for outer comfort. That feeling is not random. It is your conscience telling you that approval was too expensive. Do not ignore that feeling. The new version of you must learn to prefer self-respect over easy approval. It must learn that being liked by everyone is not a sign of strength. Sometimes it is a sign that you have not taken a real shape yet. A person with values will eventually disappoint someone. A person with boundaries will eventually be called difficult by someone who benefited from their lack of boundaries. A person with truth will eventually be disliked by someone who preferred the performance. Let that happen. You are not here to be approved by every person who meets you. You are here to become someone your own soul can trust. Approval may make you feel accepted for a moment, but respect gives you a place to stand. And once you understand the difference, you stop asking, "How do I make them like me?" and start asking, "How do I live in a way that I do not have to recover from later?" That question naturally leads to the next one. Why are you still asking people to confirm what your character must learn to know? There comes a point where you must stop handing people the responsibility of proving that you are enough. You cannot keep waiting for the message, the compliment, the invitation, the attention, the apology, or the praise before you allow yourself to feel valuable. That is not confidence. That is dependence with a softer name. The approval-seeking version of you does this quietly. It asks, "Did they notice me?" before asking, "Did I act with integrity?" It asks, "Did they praise me?" before asking, "Did I give my best?" It asks, "Did they choose me?" before asking, "Did I choose myself?" And because the question is always directed outward, your worth keeps rising and falling according to other people's reactions. This is a dangerous way to live, because people are inconsistent. Some people will value you only when they need you. Some will praise you when you are useful and ignore you when you are no longer convenient. Some will approve of you when you fit their idea of who you should be, then withdraw approval when you begin to grow beyond that role. Some will not see your effort at all, not because your effort has no value, but because they do not have the eyes, maturity, or interest to recognize it. If your worth depends on those people, you will spend your life emotionally unstable. You must understand this clearly. Another person's reaction can reveal something about them, but it does not define the truth of you. Their silence does not prove you are unworthy. Their lack of praise does not prove your work is meaningless. Their rejection does not prove you are impossible to love. Their inability to appreciate you does not mean there is nothing in you to appreciate. It may simply mean you are asking the wrong person to see what they were never able to honor. The old version of you keeps searching for confirmation in places where it has already been denied. It keeps returning to people who made you doubt yourself, hoping they will finally say the words that repair the wound they helped create. You want the person who ignored you to notice you. You want the person who dismissed you to validate you. You want the person who made you feel small to finally admit that you mattered. But that is how you stay trapped. You keep giving the key to your worth to the very hands that mishandled it. Stoicism teaches you to bring the question back to what is yours. Did you act with honesty? Did you show discipline? Did you keep your word? Did you treat people with fairness? Did you make the effort that was in your control? Did you choose courage when fear was present? Did you protect your character when approval was tempting? These are better questions because they return your value to your own conduct, not to someone else's mood. Here is the practical rule. Stop asking, "Did they approve of me?" and start asking, "Did I approve of how I carried myself?" That question is not arrogance. It is accountability. It does not mean you become blind to feedback. It means you stop using feedback as a mirror for your entire worth. You can listen to correction without collapsing. You can accept praise without becoming addicted. You can face rejection without treating it as a final sentence. Your worth cannot be something you outsource. If you need someone else to confirm it every day, then every day they have the power to take it from you. One cold reply can make you doubt yourself. One person's distance can make you feel invisible. One room's silence can make you question your entire path. That is too much authority to give to people who are also flawed, distracted, wounded, jealous, immature, or limited in their own understanding. Think about how often you have reduced your own value because someone else failed to respond properly. You worked hard, but because they did not praise it, you called it nothing. You cared deeply, but because they did not appreciate it, you called yourself foolish. You showed loyalty, but because they did not return it, you called your heart weak. You were honest, but because they misunderstood you, you started doubting your truth. This is how approval-seeking steals from you. It does not only make you chase people, it makes you misread your own life. You must stop doing that. If you acted with sincerity, let that matter, even if they did not value it. If you gave your best effort, let that stand, even if no one clapped. If you loved honestly, let that say something about your character, even if they failed to love you back with the same depth. If you chose a difficult truth, let your conscience respect you, even if the room became uncomfortable. Do not throw away your own integrity just because someone else did not reward it. The Stoic person does not need constant applause because he is training himself to be witnessed by his own conscience. He knows when he has been lazy. He knows when he has been false. He knows when he has acted from fear. He also knows when he has been disciplined, honest, patient, and brave. This inner witness becomes stronger than the crowd, not because the crowd never matters, but because the crowd is no longer the highest judge. And this is where freedom begins. When you stop asking people to confirm your worth, you become less desperate. You do not over-explain every decision. You do not chase every person who becomes distant. You do not shrink every time someone disapproves. You do not perform confidence for attention. You do not change your whole identity just because one person failed to recognize your value. You become steadier because your center returns to you. This does not mean you never want appreciation. Appreciation is human. It is good to be seen by people who love you well. It is good to receive encouragement from people you respect, but appreciation must become a gift, not a requirement for survival. Praise can warm you, but it must not build you. Attention can encourage you, but it must not define you. Love can support you, but it must not replace the self-respect you owe yourself. The version of you that needs approval will always ask, "Am I enough now?" after every reaction. The new version must learn to say, "I will measure myself by my values, my effort, my honesty, and my character." That is not pride. That is maturity. That is the end of begging the outside world to confirm what your own life must learn to stand on. Stop asking people to confirm your worth. Build a life that confirms it through action. Keep promises to yourself. Tell the truth when it is uncomfortable. Do the work when no one is watching. Leave what requires you to become false. Choose what lets you respect yourself in silence. Because the approval of others may come and go, but the self that is built on character remains with you when every room is empty. If this part hit you, press like, so this message reaches someone else who is still measuring their worth by someone's reaction. And more importantly, choose one standard today that you will keep, even if nobody praises you for it. Once your worth stops depending on confirmation, you can finally understand one of the most important Stoic distinctions. Reputation is what people think you are. Character is what you actually are when no one is watching. This difference may sound simple, but most people suffer because they spend more energy protecting the first than building the second. They want to be seen as strong more than they want to become disciplined. They want to be seen as kind more than they want to become honest. They want to be seen as successful more than they want to become consistent. They want the image of virtue, but not always the private cost of living with virtue. This is where the need for approval becomes dangerous. It makes reputation feel more important than character. You begin asking, how does this look? More than, is this right? You begin asking, what will they think? More than, what kind of person am I becoming? You begin shaping the outside while neglecting the inside, and if you do that long enough, you may create a version of yourself that is admired by others, but not trusted by your own conscience. A person obsessed with reputation is always performing. Even when he looks confident, he is dependent. His peace rises and falls with opinion. If people praise him, he feels strong. If people criticize him, he becomes unstable. If people misunderstand him, he panics. If people stop clapping, he starts questioning whether the life he built was real. That is not freedom. That is living as a servant to an audience that can change its mind at any moment. Character does not work that way. Character is quieter. It does not need immediate applause. It does not ask to be seen every time it does something right. Character is the decision to tell the truth when lying would protect your image. It is keeping your word when no one would know if you broke it. It is doing the difficult work when no one is watching. It is treating people with fairness when there is nothing to gain. It is refusing to become false, even when falsehood would make you more liked. The Stoics cared deeply about this distinction. They understood that reputation belongs partly to other people. It lives in their minds, their interpretations, their moods, their biases, their limited view of your life. You can influence it, but you can never fully own it. Character, however, belongs to you. It is built through your choices, your discipline, your restraint, your courage, your honesty, your ability to stand by what is right, even when it costs approval. That is why Marcus Aurelius kept bringing himself back to the inner life. He was an emperor, surrounded by status, attention, praise, politics, and judgment. But he still reminded himself not to be ruled by other people's opinions. He knew that applause could not make a weak soul strong, and criticism could not destroy a soul that was anchored in virtue. What mattered was not whether the crowd approved, but whether he acted according to nature, reason, and duty. This is a hard lesson because reputation is loud, character is quiet. Reputation gives quick feedback. Character often gives no audience. Reputation can be polished in public. Character must be built in private. And because people are impatient, they often choose the thing that gives faster reward. They want to look wise before they become wise. They want to look disciplined before they become disciplined. They want to look healed before they do the uncomfortable work of healing. But life eventually exposes the difference. A person with reputation but no character collapses when the performance is no longer enough. He may know how to speak well, but not how to live well. He may know how to impress people, but not how to keep promises to himself. He may know how to appear humble, but not how to accept correction. He may know how to look strong online, but still be controlled by every small rejection in private. Reputation can decorate weakness. Character transforms it. This is why you must stop living as if being seen correctly is more important than being correct with yourself. Yes, it is painful to be misunderstood. Yes, it is frustrating when people misread your intentions. Yes, it can hurt when your reputation does not reflect your heart. But if you spend your life trying to manage every opinion, you will have no energy left to build the person those opinions are supposed to describe. Here is the practical rule. Build what no one can take from you. People can take praise away. They can misunderstand your motives. They can ignore your effort. They can twist your story. They can give credit to someone else. They can dislike you for reasons that have little to do with truth, but they cannot take your character unless you abandon it. They cannot make you dishonest unless you choose dishonesty. They cannot make you cowardly unless you choose cowardice. They cannot make you false unless you trade truth for approval. So ask yourself, am I trying to look like a good person or become one? Am I trying to look confident or become steady? Am I trying to look disciplined or actually keep the promises I make when no one is watching? Am I trying to look unbothered Or am I truly training my mind not to be owned by opinion? These questions cut through performance. They force you back to the foundation. And the foundation is this: reputation is borrowed, character is owned. Reputation depends on witnesses. Character exists even in solitude. Reputation can be manipulated. Character must be practiced. Reputation may open doors, but character decides what you become after you walk through them. Reputation may make people admire you, but character decides whether you can sit alone without feeling like a fraud. The version of you that needs approval will keep chasing reputation because reputation gives it something to hold up and say, "Look, I matter." But the new version of you must build character so deeply that even when no one notices, you still know your life has weight. You do not need to be praised for every good act. You do not need to be understood in every moment. You do not need every person to see the truth of you before you can live from it. This does not mean reputation is meaningless. A good reputation can be useful. It can reflect trust, consistency, and honorable conduct. But it becomes dangerous when you protect reputation at the expense of character. If you lie to preserve your image, you lose. If you betray your values to stay liked, you lose. If you become a performer of virtue instead of a practitioner of it, you lose, even if people applaud. The Stoic person chooses the harder path. He would rather be good than merely appear good. He would rather be honest than impressive. He would rather be steady than popular. He would rather lose approval than lose himself. Because he understands that a reputation can follow him in public, but character is what he must live with in silence. So destroy the version of you that needs everyone to think well of you before you can live well. Build the part of you that can act rightly even when misunderstood. Build the part that does not collapse when applause disappears. Build the part that can say, "My task is not to control their opinion. My task is to control my conduct." That is freedom. Not a perfect reputation, but a clean conscience. Not universal approval, but private integrity. Not being admired by everyone, but becoming someone your own soul can respect when the room is empty. And when character begins to matter more than reputation, you start seeing why trying to be liked by everyone destroys identity. Trying to be liked by everyone sounds harmless until you realize what it slowly takes from you. At first, you only adjust small things. You soften a sentence. You hide an opinion. You laugh when you do not want to laugh. You agree to plans you do not want. You become a little quieter around strong personalities. A little louder around people who reward confidence. A little more agreeable around people who dislike disagreement. You tell yourself it is normal. You tell yourself everyone adapts. But over time, adaptation becomes disappearance. You stop asking, "Who am I?" and start asking, "Who do they need me to be?" That is where identity begins to break. Not all at once, slowly, quietly, in pieces. One room gets the version of you that is funny. Another room gets the version that is silent. Another room gets the version that is ambitious. Another room gets the version that pretends not to care. Another room gets the version that agrees with everything because conflict feels dangerous. And after enough rooms, enough performances, enough tiny betrayals, you come home and feel strangely empty because you no longer know which version was real. The approval-seeking version of you believes that being liked everywhere means you are winning. But sometimes being liked everywhere only means you have not taken a real shape. A person with no edges can fit into many places, but he also has nothing firm to stand on. If your personality changes every time the room changes, then your identity is not being expressed. It is being negotiated. This is why trying to be liked by everyone destroys you. It teaches you to treat yourself like a product and every person like a customer. You study what they reward, then you adjust the packaging. You become more quiet, more charming, more useful, more impressive, more agreeable, more emotional, less emotional, more available, less honest. You do not speak from truth. You speak from strategy. You do not live from values. You live from reaction. You become skilled at being accepted, but weak at being known. And there is a painful irony here. The more you try to be liked by everyone, the harder it becomes for anyone to truly love you. Because love requires something real to meet. Respect requires consistency. Trust requires a stable center. If people only meet the version of you designed to please them, they are not approving of you. They are approving of the mask you built for their comfort. And the mask may be liked, but the person behind it remains lonely. This is why some people feel unseen even when they are surrounded by approval. They are praised, invited, complimented and included, but deep down they know the approval is not touching the real self. It is touching the performance. They know that if they spoke more honestly, set a boundary, changed direction, stopped being convenient, or revealed what they truly think, some of that approval might disappear. So they keep performing. And the more they perform, the more invisible they feel. The Stoic path does not ask you to become rude, rigid, or careless with people. It asks you to stop treating universal approval as a worthy goal. Universal approval is impossible. Even if you become kind, some will call you weak. If you become disciplined, some will call you cold. If you become honest, some will call you harsh. If you become quiet, some will call you arrogant. If you become ambitious, some will call you selfish. If you become peaceful, some will say you changed. No matter what you become, someone will dislike the shape of it. So the question is not, how do I become liked by everyone? The question is, what kind of person can I respect being, even when not everyone likes it? That question gives your identity back to you. A mature identity is not built by pleasing every room. It is built by living from a few values so consistently that people begin to know where you stand. You are honest, even when honesty is not rewarded. You are kind, but not available for misuse. You are calm, but not silent out of fear. You are loyal, but not loyal to what destroys you. You are open to correction, but not open to being reshaped by every opinion. You can adapt your manners without abandoning your soul. There is a difference between social intelligence and self-erasure. Social intelligence means you understand context. You do not speak carelessly. You respect timing, tone, and people's differences. Self-erasure means you bury the truth of who you are because acceptance has become more important than integrity. One is wisdom. The other is fear. One helps you communicate, the other makes you disappear. Here is the practical rule. Stop editing your identity for people who only like you when you are easy for them. If someone only approves of the version of you that never says no, that is not acceptance. If they only like you when you agree, that is not respect. If they only celebrate your growth when it does not inconvenience them, that is not support. If they only love the version of you that stays small, then their approval is asking you to betray your future. You must become willing to disappoint the wrong audience. This does not mean you should chase conflict. It means you should stop treating disapproval as proof that you did something wrong. Sometimes people disapprove because you acted poorly. When that happens, learn, apologize, correct yourself. But sometimes people disapprove because you stopped fitting the role they preferred. Sometimes they dislike the new boundary because they benefited from the old absence of one. Sometimes they call you different because they can no longer recognize the version of you they knew how to control. In those moments, losing approval is not a failure. It is evidence that you are becoming real. The approval-seeking version of you wants to be understood by everyone before it moves, but real growth often moves before everyone understands. You may have to become more disciplined while others call you boring. You may have to become more private while others call you distant. You may have to become more honest while others call you difficult. You may have to become more self-respecting while others call you selfish. If you stop every time someone dislikes the change, you will never become anything stable. Identity requires choosing. You cannot be everything to everyone and still be someone to yourself. You cannot keep every person comfortable and still live a life shaped by truth. You cannot adjust endlessly to every room and still have an inner home. At some point, you must decide what you stand for, what you will not trade, what you will not fake, what you will not shrink, and what kind of approval is too expensive to accept. Because some approval costs your voice, some approval costs your boundaries, some approval costs your honesty, some approval costs your self-respect, some approval costs the future version of you who was waiting for you to stop pretending. The new version of you must understand this. Being liked is pleasant, but being real is stronger. Approval may open the door to a room, but identity decides whether you can stand inside that room without becoming false. Do not destroy yourself trying to be acceptable to everyone. Build yourself so clearly that the right people know where to find you, and the wrong people know they can no longer reshape you. Trying to be liked by everyone destroys your identity because it makes the crowd your author. Character gives the pen back to you. If you want more episodes that do not just comfort you, but train you, like this video and subscribe. And if there is one line from this episode that you needed to hear, write it down somewhere, because the old version of you will try to forget it when approval starts calling again. Once you take the pen back, you begin to see the real cost of keeping peace by betraying yourself. There is a kind of peace that is not peace at all. It is only silence with a wound underneath it. It is the quiet you create by swallowing your truth, hiding your needs, softening your boundaries, and pretending something is acceptable when your soul already knows it is not. From the outside, everything looks calm. No argument, no conflict, no tension in the room. But inside, something is being weakened every time you choose approval over honesty. This is the cost of betraying yourself to keep peace. You tell yourself, it is not worth it. You tell yourself, I do not want to make things difficult. You tell yourself, maybe I am overthinking. You tell yourself, maybe I should just let it go. And sometimes, letting go is wisdom. Not every irritation deserves a battle. Not every opinion deserves a correction. Not every discomfort requires confrontation. But there is a difference between letting go from strength and staying quiet because you are afraid of losing approval. One gives you peace. The other slowly teaches you to disappear. Every time you betray yourself to keep someone comfortable, you send a message inward. You tell your own mind, my truth is less important than their reaction. You tell your own heart, your discomfort does not matter as much as their approval. You tell your own character, we will bend whenever acceptance feels threatened. And after enough moments like that, you stop trusting yourself. Not because others betrayed you, but because you kept abandoning yourself in front of them. This is why people can be surrounded by relationships and still feel deeply alone. They are liked but not known. They are accepted but not honest. They are praised for being easy, patient, understanding, and calm, but inside, they know the approval came from a version of themselves that was edited for survival. They kept the peace in the room by creating war inside themselves. That is too expensive. The approval-seeking version of you is terrified of visible conflict, but it tolerates invisible conflict every day. It will avoid one uncomfortable conversation, then spend weeks carrying resentment. It will avoid saying no, then secretly feel used. It will avoid setting a boundary, then feel bitter when people keep crossing it. It will avoid disappointing someone, then feel disappointed in itself. This is not maturity. This is delayed suffering. The Stoic does not chase conflict, but he also does not worship comfort. He understands that a good life sometimes requires clean discomfort. It is uncomfortable to tell the truth. It is uncomfortable to say, "This does not work for me." It is uncomfortable to stop playing a role people rewarded you for. It is uncomfortable to disappoint someone whose approval used to feel necessary. But the discomfort of honesty is lighter than the weight of self-betrayal. You must learn to respect that difference. A false peace asks you to stay agreeable while your values are being compromised. A real peace asks you to live so cleanly that you do not have to keep negotiating with your conscience at night. False peace is the room being quiet while your dignity is being drained. Real peace is your inner world being steady even if someone else is displeased. False peace protects the relationship from truth. Real peace protects your character from decay. Here is the practical rule. Do not call it peace if it requires you to keep abandoning yourself. If keeping the relationship means you must always hide what hurts you, that is not peace. If keeping the friendship means you must always agree, that is not peace. If keeping the approval means you must keep shrinking your standards, that is not peace. If keeping the image means you must live against your values, that is not peace. That is surrender dressed as harmony. This does not mean you should become harsh or dramatic. The point is not to speak every thought with no discipline. The point is to stop confusing emotional avoidance with wisdom. A strong person can speak calmly. He can say no without attacking. He can express disagreement without disrespect. He can end a pattern without humiliating anyone. He can protect his own values without making another person the enemy. But he does not keep sacrificing his inner foundation just to keep the surface smooth. Ask yourself where you are paying for approval with self-betrayal. Where do you say yes because no might make them cold? Where do you stay quiet because honesty might change how they see you? Where do you pretend to be fine because expressing pain might make you seem difficult? Where do you lower your standards because being chosen feels safer than being alone? These are not small questions. These are the places where the old version of you is still alive, and you will feel it in your body when you betray yourself. You may get the approval, but not the peace. You may avoid the argument, but not the resentment. You may keep the connection, but lose the feeling of being clean inside it. Your conscience will whisper, "You knew better." That whisper is not there to shame you. It is there to wake you up. The version of you that needs approval will always choose the easier discomfort. It will choose the discomfort of self-abandonment because it is hidden. It will avoid the discomfort of truth because it is visible. But growth requires the opposite. You must become willing to face visible discomfort so you can end the hidden one. You must become willing to be honest in the room so you do not have to suffer in silence afterward. The new version of you must learn this. Peace is not the absence of disagreement. Peace is the absence of self-betrayal. Peace is not everyone being pleased with you. Peace is you being able to sit alone and know you did not sell your character for temporary approval. Peace is not being liked in every room. Peace is leaving the room with your soul still intact. So stop keeping peace by wounding yourself. Stop protecting relationships that only survive when you are silent about what matters. Stop calling it maturity when it is really fear. The goal is not to become difficult. The goal is to become honest enough that your outer life and inner life are no longer enemies. Because every time you betray yourself to be accepted, you weaken the foundation you are supposed to stand on. But every time you choose truth with calmness, every time you choose a boundary with dignity, every time you choose self-respect over the comfort of being approved, you destroy the old version of you and build a self that no longer needs permission to exist. And that self must learn one of the hardest skills of all, tolerating being misunderstood. One of the clearest signs of maturity is the ability to be misunderstood without immediately falling apart. Not because misunderstanding feels good. It does not. It can feel unfair, lonely, and deeply frustrating, especially when your intentions were clean and someone reads them through suspicion, insecurity, or their own limited story. But if every misunderstanding forces you into panic, explanation, defense, and emotional exhaustion, then your peace is still being controlled by other people's interpretations. The approval-seeking version of you cannot tolerate being misunderstood because it treats misunderstanding like danger. It believes that if someone gets the wrong idea, you must fix it immediately. If someone thinks badly of you, you must correct the image. If someone calls you selfish for having a boundary, you must prove you are still kind. If someone thinks your silence is arrogance, you must explain your whole heart. If someone dislikes your change, you must show them that you are still the person they can approve of. This is how you become trapped in endless explanation. You begin living as if every false opinion about you is an emergency. You hear one comment, and your mind starts building the paragraph. You imagine what they think, what they might say, how they might describe you, how they might misunderstand your decision. And suddenly, you are no longer living from your values. You are managing an invisible audience. You are trying to reach into other people's minds and arrange the furniture so you can feel safe. But that is not your work. Your work is to act with character. Their interpretation is not fully yours. You can be clear, honest, respectful, and still be misunderstood. You can speak calmly and still be called cold. You can set a healthy boundary and still be called selfish. You can grow and still be accused of changing in a negative way. You can protect your peace and still be seen as distant by people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. If you cannot tolerate that, you will return to the old prison. You will start softening your truth so no one misreads it. You will over-explain your boundaries so no one judges them. You will make your decisions smaller so no one feels threatened. You will keep proving your goodness to people who are committed to seeing your growth as betrayal. And the more you do this, the more your life becomes controlled by the fear of being wrongly perceived. This fear is understandable, but it is dangerous. Because some people do not misunderstand you by accident. Some people misunderstand you because it protects their version of the story. If they admit your boundary is reasonable, they may have to admit they crossed one. If they admit your silence is discipline, they may have to admit their behavior made distance necessary. If they admit your change is growth, they may have to face the fact that they preferred you when you were easier to manage. So they call you difficult, they call you cold, they call you arrogant, they say you have changed, as if change is always a crime. And if you are still addicted to approval, you will run back to explain, defend, soften, and repair the image. You will hand them your peace just to be understood by someone who may not want understanding in the first place. A Stoic person has to develop the strength to be seen incorrectly without becoming unstable. This does not mean you ignore every criticism. If someone points out a real flaw, listen. If you acted poorly, correct yourself. If you harmed someone, take responsibility. But there is a difference between accountability and image management. Accountability says, if there is truth here, I will face it. Image management says, I cannot rest until everyone sees me exactly the way I want to be seen. That second one is slavery. Epictetus gave a hard lesson when he suggested that if you want to improve, you must be willing to be thought foolish or unimpressive for a while. That is a brutal truth for the approval-seeking mind. Growth will not always look impressive to people who are used to your old patterns. Discipline may look boring, boundaries may look harsh, privacy may look distant, self-respect may look selfish, healing may look like withdrawal. But if you stop your growth every time someone misreads it, you will never leave the version of you they were comfortable with. Here is the practical rule. Explain yourself once if clarity is useful, then stop performing your innocence. One calm explanation is communication. 10 desperate explanations are fear. If someone genuinely wants to understand, they will use your explanation as a bridge. If they want to judge you, they will use your explanation as more material. Learn the difference. Do not keep handing your heart to people who keep turning it into evidence against you. There will be moments when you want to say, "But that is not what I meant." Sometimes you should say it. There will be moments when you want to clarify your intention. Sometimes that is necessary, but after you have spoken clearly, you must let the rest belong to them. You cannot live chained to the task of correcting every distorted version of you that exists in someone else's mind. That task has no end. You will spend your whole life chasing shadows. The stronger path is quieter. You ask yourself, did I act with integrity? Did I speak as clearly as I could? Did I correct what was mine to correct? Did I stay aligned with my values? If the answer is yes, then you must learn to stand there, even if someone else refuses to see it. That is not arrogance. That is internal stability. Being misunderstood becomes less frightening when your conscience is clean. If you know you acted from truth, you do not need to panic every time someone calls it something else. If you know your boundary was necessary, you do not need to collapse because someone calls it selfish. If you know your silence protected your peace, you do not need to prove that it was not weakness. The more rooted you are in character, the less desperate you become for perfect interpretation. And understand this, some people will only understand you after you stop needing them to. Some people need time. Some people need distance. Some people need to lose access to the old version of you before they can recognize what they took for granted. But whether they understand now, later, or never, your life cannot remain on hold until their perception becomes fair. You must keep moving. The version of you that needs approval wants every important person to bless your path before you walk it. The new version understands that some paths must be walked while people are still confused by them. You may have to become disciplined while others think you are being extreme. You may have to become private while others think you are hiding. You may have to become firm while others think you are unkind. You may have to become independent while others think you are drifting away. Let them think for a while. Your responsibility is not to be perfectly understood. Your responsibility is to be honest, disciplined, fair, and aligned with your values. The right people may still misunderstand you sometimes, but they will be willing to listen. The wrong people will use misunderstanding as a way to keep you explaining, shrinking, and begging for approval. Do not confuse the two. Learning to tolerate being misunderstood does not make you cold. It makes you stable. It teaches you that your identity is not a public vote. It teaches you that your worth does not disappear because someone's interpretation is incomplete. It teaches you that the approval of others is not more important than the truth of your own conduct. So destroy the version of you that needs everyone to understand before you can be at peace. Build the version that can say, I will speak clearly, I will act rightly, I will correct myself when I am wrong, but I will not spend my life begging every mind to see me fairly, because freedom begins when you no longer abandon your path just because someone else cannot understand the road. If you are still here, that means this is not just information for you, it is touching something real. Subscribe to the channel and in the comments write this sentence if you mean it. I will not abandon myself to be understood. Now the work becomes even more private because the next stage is not about being seen as strong. It is about becoming strong when no one is watching. There is a dangerous moment in a person's life when he becomes more concerned with appearing disciplined than being disciplined. More concerned with appearing confident than becoming steady, more concerned with appearing wise than actually living wisely. He begins to turn growth into a performance. He does the right thing only when it can be seen. He speaks about values more than he practices them. He wants the image of strength without the private obedience that strength requires. This is what happens when approval becomes the center. Even self-improvement becomes a stage. You start asking, will people notice that I am changing? You start wanting your discipline to be admired, your healing to be recognized, your silence to be interpreted correctly, your boundaries to look powerful, your progress to be visible. And slowly, the work that was supposed to free you becomes another way to seek applause. But real character is built where no one is clapping. It is built in the private moments when you keep your word to yourself and no one knows. It is built when you wake up and do the work without posting about it. It is built when you choose restraint in a conversation that no one will praise you for. It is built when you refuse a temptation that would have stayed hidden. It is built when you tell the truth, even though lying would protect your image. It is built when you do the right thing, not because it makes you look good, but because becoming false would make you unable to respect yourself. A public performance needs witnesses. A private standard needs only conscience. That is the difference. The approval-seeking version of you wants growth to be seen. The stronger version wants growth to be real. One asks, "Do they think I am disciplined?" The other asks, "Did I keep my promise today?" One asks, "Do they see me as strong?" The other asks, "Did I act with courage when fear was present?" One asks, "Do they admire my values?" The other asks, "Did I live by them when admiration was unavailable?" This is where many people fool themselves. They talk about becoming better, but they still live for reaction. They announce every change. They display every boundary. They turn every private lesson into a public identity. And there's nothing wrong with sharing growth when it helps others. But if you cannot grow quietly, if your progress needs an audience to feel real, then approval is still holding the pen. The Stoic path is quieter than that. It does not ask you to build a life that looks impressive from the outside while remaining weak within. It asks you to build a life that can survive silence. A life where your standards do not depend on who is watching. A life where you do not need people to call you strong before you act with strength. A life where your discipline remains intact, even when there is no reward, no praise, no recognition, no immediate emotional return. That is rare because private standards are lonely at first. No one sees the moment you almost broke your boundary, but did not. No one sees the message you chose not to send. No one sees the excuse you swallowed and replaced with effort. No one sees the envy you examined instead of obeying. No one sees the old habit you resisted in silence. But those hidden victories matter. They are the foundation of the person you are becoming. Here is the practical rule. Create standards that do not require an audience. Decide what kind of person you will be when nobody knows the choice was difficult. Decide how you will speak when no one can reward your honesty. Decide how you will work when no one is tracking your effort. Decide how you will treat people who cannot benefit you. Decide what you will refuse, even if refusing it brings no applause. These are the standards that make you strong from the inside. A man with private standards does not need to announce every line he has drawn. He simply lives differently. He does not need to prove that he has changed. His consistency proves it over time. He does not need to convince everyone that he respects himself. His choices make it visible. He does not need to turn every act of discipline into a performance. He understands that the deepest victories are often the ones no one sees. And this is important. Public approval can actually weaken a person who has no private foundation. Praise can make him perform more than practice. Attention can make him addicted to looking disciplined instead of being disciplined. Admiration can make him protect the image instead of correcting the flaw. If his identity becomes the performance of growth, then he may avoid honest self-examination because the truth might disturb the image he created. Private standards protect you from that. They bring you back to the real question, not how do I appear, but how am I living, not what do they think I am, but what do my repeated actions prove, not did the room approve, but did my conscience approve. This is the kind of accountability that cannot be faked for long. The approval-seeking version of you wants the reward before the roots. It wants recognition before consistency. It wants to be seen as transformed before it has endured the private discomfort of transformation. But the new version must accept a harder path. Become strong before you are called strong. Become disciplined before anyone admires it. Become peaceful before anyone notices your peace. Become honest before honesty benefits your image. Become self-respecting before others validate your boundaries. That is how character is built. Do not live as a public performance. Live as a private standard. Let your life have a code that remains active when the room is empty. Let your values guide you when approval is absent. Let your conscience become a stronger witness than the crowd, because applause can praise a mask, but private standards build a person. And the version of you that no longer needs to perform its worth becomes far harder to control, far harder to corrupt, and far more difficult to separate from itself. Private standards prepare you for the next choice, self-respect over emotional applause. Emotional applause is seductive because it feels like proof. Someone praises you, and for a moment you feel important. Someone admires you, and for a moment you feel chosen. Someone reacts warmly, and for a moment you feel safe. That warmth can become addictive, especially when you have spent too long doubting yourself. You begin to chase the feeling, not because it is evil, but because it gives quick relief to a deeper insecurity. But applause fades. The compliment ends, the attention moves, the room changes. The person who admired you yesterday becomes distracted today. The same people who praised your softness may criticize your boundaries. The same people who enjoyed your availability may dislike your discipline. The same people who clapped for the version of you that pleased them may become silent when you start living in a way that serves your soul. If your confidence depends on applause, then your confidence will keep disappearing whenever the applause stops. Self-respect is different. It does not always feel exciting. It does not always get noticed. It does not always bring immediate approval. Sometimes self-respect feels like being alone with a difficult decision. Sometimes it feels like saying no while your chest tightens. Sometimes it feels like walking away from a room where your old self would have stayed to be liked. Sometimes it feels like doing the right thing and receiving no praise at all. But unlike applause, self-respect stays with you when the room is empty. That is why it must become more important. The approval-seeking version of you wants the emotional reward first. It wants to feel admired before it feels steady. It wants someone to say, "You did well," before it trusts the effort. It wants to be chosen before it chooses itself. It wants the outside world to provide the feeling that should have been built from the inside. But when you live this way, your inner life becomes unstable. Every reaction becomes a vote. Every silence becomes a threat. Every lack of praise feels like proof that you failed. This is not freedom. This is emotional dependence. Think about the moments when you traded self-respect for applause. You said what sounded impressive instead of what was true. You stayed in a place that made you smaller because leaving would disappoint people. You acted confident in public while breaking promises to yourself in private. You tried to look healed, look strong, look unbothered, look successful, look chosen. But underneath the performance, something inside you knew the truth. You were not building peace. You were building an image that needed constant feeding. And the image is never satisfied. Emotional applause can make you feel powerful for a moment, but it cannot repair the damage of betraying yourself. You may get the praise and still feel empty. You may get the attention and still feel anxious. You may get the approval and still feel like a fraud because deep down you know what it cost. You know when you acted against your values. You know when you exaggerated to look better. You know when you stayed silent out of fear. You know when you accepted less than your standards because being chosen felt better than being alone. The Stoic lesson is simple but hard. Do not trade what is permanent for what is temporary. Applause is temporary. Approval is temporary. Attention is temporary. Reputation is unstable. But the relationship you have with your own conscience follows you everywhere. You cannot escape it. You can impress a crowd and still be disturbed by yourself. You can receive praise and still know you were false. You can be admired by others and still lose trust in your own soul. That loss is expensive. Here is the practical rule. Before chasing approval, ask, what will this cost my self-respect? If the answer is your honesty, the price is too high. If the answer is your boundary, the price is too high. If the answer is your discipline, the price is too high. If the answer is your peace, your values, your dignity, or your ability to look yourself in the mirror without shame, the price is too high. No amount of applause is worth becoming someone you cannot trust. This does not mean you reject encouragement. A wise person can receive praise without being owned by it. He can appreciate recognition without needing it to survive. He can enjoy being seen without turning visibility into identity. The problem is not applause itself. The problem is when applause becomes the reason you act. The problem is when you stop asking what is right and start asking what will be rewarded. The problem is when you would rather be admired falsely than stand quietly in truth. Self-respect must become the higher reward. When you choose self-respect, you may lose some easy approval. Let that happen. You may lose the approval of people who liked you better when you were available for misuse. You may lose the admiration of people who only understood the version of you that performed strength but did not practice it. You may lose the warmth of people who preferred your silence over your honesty. But you will gain something stronger. You will gain the feeling of being on your own side. That feeling is not loud, but it is powerful. It is the feeling of knowing you did not lie to be liked. You did not beg to be chosen. You did not shrink to make someone comfortable. You did not abandon a standard just to keep emotional applause coming. You did not let the hunger for approval make you false. Even if no one claps, you can sit with yourself and know you remained clean. This is where the old version begins to die. It dies when you stop needing every good act to be noticed. It dies when you stop turning your life into a performance for people who may not even share your values. It dies when you choose the quiet respect of your own conscience over the temporary warmth of being praised by the wrong crowd. It dies when you understand that being admired is pleasant, but being able to trust yourself is necessary. The new version of you must learn to live from that necessity. Do the work because the work is yours. Tell the truth because truth keeps your soul ordered. Set the boundary because your peace matters. Keep the promise because your word should mean something even when no one hears it. Choose discipline because your life should not depend on motivation, mood, or recognition. Choose self-respect because applause cannot hold you when you are alone. And you will be alone sometimes. Everyone is. The crowd will not follow you into every private hour. Compliments will not sit beside you in the quiet moments when you know whether you acted rightly or falsely. Attention will not save you from the discomfort of a weak conscience. That is why self-respect matters more than emotional applause. It is the thing that remains when performance ends. So stop asking, will they praise me for this? Ask, will I respect myself after this? Stop asking, will this make me look strong? Ask, will this make me stronger? Stop asking, will this make them choose me? Ask, am I choosing the life that does not require me to abandon myself? Because applause can make you feel accepted for a moment, but self-respect gives you a place to stand for a lifetime. And the version of you that chooses self-respect over emotional applause becomes free in a way approval seekers cannot understand. It no longer needs the room to clap before it knows it acted with dignity. If you value this kind of calm, serious self-work, subscribe now and keep this episode saved. Come back to it whenever you feel yourself chasing applause instead of choosing self-respect. When self-respect becomes the higher reward, your actions begin to come from a cleaner place. There is a quiet difference between doing something because it is right and doing something because you want to be noticed. From the outside, the action may look the same. You may work hard, you may speak kindly, you may help someone, you may make a difficult choice, you may show discipline. But inside, the source matters. One person acts from values. Another acts from hunger. One is guided by character. The other is guided by attention. And attention is a dangerous master. When your actions come from attention, you begin measuring everything by reaction. Did they see it? Did they praise it? Did they reply? Did they admire me? Did it make me look strong, wise, successful, attractive, generous, disciplined, or important? The action is no longer complete in itself. It needs witnesses to feel real. It needs applause to feel valuable. It needs someone else's reaction to confirm that it mattered. This is how approval seeking turns even good behavior into emotional dependence. You do the generous thing, but secretly resent people if they do not notice. You work hard, but lose motivation if no one praises the effort. You post your progress, not because it serves anyone, but because silence makes you feel invisible. You act calm, not because you are becoming steady, but because you want others to think you are unbothered. You choose discipline, but only when discipline can be admired. That is not freedom, that is performance with a cleaner costume. A values-driven person is different. He still appreciates recognition, but recognition is not the reason he acts. He tells the truth because truth keeps his soul clean. He works because the work is his responsibility. He keeps a promise because his word should mean something. He helps because service is part of his character. He walks away because peace matters, not because he wants someone to chase him. He stays silent because silence protects his dignity, not because he wants to appear mysterious. The action comes from the center, not from the crowd. This is one of the deepest Stoic disciplines, to act rightly without needing the world to reward you for it. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to do what nature and duty require, then move on without demanding applause. The bee does not announce the honey. The vine does not demand praise for bearing grapes. The sun does not ask to be thanked before it rises. It simply does what belongs to it. A human being with character must learn the same quiet power. Do what is yours to do because it is yours to do. The approval-seeking version of you hates this because it wants proof. It wants visible evidence that the action landed. It wants people to respond in a way that makes the effort feel worth it. But if you need attention to continue doing what is right, then your values are not yet strong enough. They are still dependent on the room. And anything dependent on the room can be weakened by silence. Here is the practical rule. Before you act, ask, would I still do this if no one noticed? Would you still train if no one admired your discipline? Would you still be honest if no one praised your integrity? Would you still be kind if no one called you kind? Would you still build your life carefully if no one clapped for the progress? Would you still choose self-respect if no one saw the boundary? If the answer is no, then attention may be guiding you more than values. This question is not meant to shame you. It is meant to purify your motive. Because all of us enjoy being seen. All of us enjoy recognition. But there is a difference between receiving attention and needing attention. There is a difference between sharing your progress and being unable to progress unless it is seen. There is a difference between inspiring people and secretly begging them to confirm that your life has meaning. You must learn that meaning does not begin with being noticed. Meaning begins with alignment. When your actions align with your values, they already have weight. Even if no one praises them, even if no one understands them, even if no one sees the difficulty behind them. The honest choice matters because it shapes you. The disciplined action matters because it trains you. The boundary matters because it protects you. The quiet effort matters because it builds trust between you and yourself. The world may not always recognize the value of those moments, but your character records them. And this is why values make you stronger than attention ever can. Attention is inconsistent. Values are chosen. Attention comes from outside. Values are practiced inside. Attention can disappear without warning. Values can remain active even in silence. Attention asks, "How am I being seen?" Values ask, "How am I living?" That second question builds a steadier life. Think of the person who only works when people are watching. The moment the audience disappears, the effort disappears with it. Think of the person who only acts kind when kindness improves their image. The moment kindness becomes inconvenient, the mask drops. Think of the person who only speaks about principles when principles make them look noble. The moment those principles cost comfort, they become negotiable. This is what happens when attention replaces values. The person has movement, but no root. The new version of you must build roots. You must decide what you stand for before the room responds. You must know what kind of person you are trying to become before people approve or disapprove. You must choose your standards while nobody is clapping, because that is where the real test happens. Anyone can look principled when principle is rewarded. Anyone can look disciplined when discipline is admired. Anyone can look calm when calm improves their image. But the real question is whether those qualities remain when there is no audience. That is character, and character does not need to keep announcing itself. It becomes visible over time through repeated action, not one performance, not one impressive moment, repetition, consistency, private obedience, calm choices, honest corrections, quiet effort. The world may notice later, or it may not. But by then, the reward has already happened inside you. You became less dependent, less scattered, less hungry, less controlled by reaction. You became someone who can act without asking the crowd to give your action meaning. This is how you destroy the approval-seeking version of you. You stop feeding every action with the question, "Will this make them notice me?" and start feeding it with, "Does this reflect the person I want to become?" You stop turning your life into a message aimed at other people and start turning it into a practice aimed at your own character. You stop needing every good thing to be seen because you understand that the deepest work is often invisible while it is being built. Let your actions come from values, not attention. Let discipline guide you when recognition is absent. Let truth guide you when approval is uncertain. Let self-respect guide you when being liked becomes tempting. Let character guide you when the crowd is silent, because the life built for attention will always panic when attention moves away. But the life built on values remains standing, even when no one is watching. And once your life is built on values, you become calm enough to be disliked. You are not free until you can be disliked without immediately trying to repair the feeling. Not disliked because you were cruel. Not disliked because you acted without character. Not disliked because you harmed people and refused to take responsibility. That is not strength, that is blindness. But disliked because you told the truth calmly, disliked because you set a boundary, disliked because you stopped being available for a role that was draining you, disliked because you became more honest than convenient. That is a different kind of dislike, and you must learn to stand inside it without falling apart. The approval-seeking version of you treats being disliked as proof that something is wrong. Someone becomes cold, and you immediately question your decision. Someone criticizes your boundary, and you start wondering if you were too harsh. Someone misunderstands your silence, and you feel the urge to explain your entire heart. Someone no longer responds warmly to your growth, and you begin shrinking back toward the old version of yourself just to recover the comfort of being accepted. That is how disapproval controls you. It does not always need to attack you loudly. Sometimes it only needs to make you uncomfortable. A colder tone, a disappointed look, a sarcastic comment, a little distance, a change in energy. And suddenly, your old self wakes up and says, "Fix this. Make them like you again. Become easier. Become softer. Say less. Ask for less. Need less. Do not let them think badly of you." If you obey that voice every time, you will never live from character. You will live from emotional avoidance. You must understand something clearly. Being disliked is not always evidence that you are wrong. Sometimes it is evidence that you stopped pretending. Sometimes it is evidence that your boundaries are finally visible. Sometimes it is evidence that your growth has become inconvenient to people who preferred your old weakness. Sometimes it is evidence that you are no longer willing to make yourself smaller just to keep the room comfortable. This does not mean every criticism is jealousy. It does not mean every person who dislikes you is toxic. That kind of thinking is immature. A Stoic person does not protect his ego by dismissing all correction. He examines himself. He asks, "Is there truth here? Did I act unjustly? Did I speak with unnecessary harshness? Did I confuse firmness with pride? Did I use self-respect as an excuse to become selfish?" If the answer is yes, he corrects himself. But if his conscience is clear, if his action was honest, measured and aligned with his values, then he does not abandon himself simply because someone else is displeased. That is the balance. A weak person says, "Everyone must like me, or I am unsafe." An arrogant person says, "I do not care what anyone thinks, even when they are right." A mature person says, "I will listen for truth, but I will not be ruled by approval." This is the kind of calm you are building. Not the coldness of someone who has no heart, but the steadiness of someone who no longer hands his heart to every opinion. There will be people who dislike your discipline because it reminds them of their excuses. There will be people who dislike your boundaries because they benefited from your lack of them. There will be people who dislike your peace because they only knew how to connect through drama. There will be people who dislike your ambition because your growth makes their stagnation harder to ignore. There will be people who dislike your silence because they can no longer use your explanations as a place to argue. Let them dislike what they no longer control. This is not revenge. It is not superiority. It is simply the natural cost of becoming real. The more clearly you live, the less universally acceptable you become. A person with no standards can be shaped by any room. A person with standards will eventually create friction. A person with no boundaries may be liked by many people who enjoy access. A person with boundaries will disappoint those same people. A person who always says yes may be praised as kind. A person who says no with dignity may be called difficult by the people who depended on his fear. You must become calm enough to let that happen. Here is the practical rule. When someone dislikes your honest growth, do not immediately edit yourself to win back approval. Pause. Examine. If you were wrong, correct your behavior. If you were unkind, apologize. If you were unclear, clarify once. But if the only problem is that your truth made someone uncomfortable, do not betray the truth to make them comfortable again. Their discomfort is not automatically your failure. This is where many people lose years of their lives. They begin to grow, then someone disapproves and they run back to the old self. They become more disciplined, then friends mock them for being too serious, so they soften the discipline. They become more private, then people call them distant, so they start oversharing again. They set a boundary, then someone calls them selfish, so they remove the boundary and return to resentment. They choose a new path, then someone says, "You changed," so they become smaller to prove they are still acceptable. But growth that collapses at the first sign of disapproval is not growth yet. It is a performance waiting for permission. The new version of you must be able to say, "Yes, I changed. I had to." Not with anger, not with pride, with calm truth. You changed because the old version was exhausted. You changed because being liked was costing too much. You changed because peace became more important than constant approval. You changed because your life needed values, not just reactions. If that change makes some people uncomfortable, that does not automatically mean you chose wrongly. It may mean they are meeting your real shape for the first time. And the real shape of a person cannot please everyone. Think of what happens when you are calm enough to be disliked. You stop over-explaining. You stop chasing people who withdraw approval to control you. You stop apologizing for every boundary. You stop confusing someone's disappointment with your guilt. You stop needing every person to understand the version of you that your conscience already understands. You become less dramatic, less reactive, less hungry, less easy to manipulate. You also become kinder in a deeper way. Because when you no longer need people to like you, you can love them more honestly. You do not flatter them for approval. You do not agree falsely to stay safe. You do not give from resentment. You do not help only to be seen as helpful. Your kindness becomes cleaner because it is no longer a transaction. You can care about people without needing them to confirm your identity. That is real strength. The approval-seeking version of you thinks being disliked will destroy you, but most of the time it does not destroy you. It only reveals what you were depending on. It reveals whose opinion had too much power. It reveals where your confidence was still borrowed. It reveals how quickly you were willing to abandon yourself to recover emotional comfort. That revelation is not pleasant, but it is useful. It shows you where the work remains. So practice standing calmly in small disapproval. Say no without adding 5 excuses. Express an honest opinion without checking every face for permission afterward. Let a message sit unanswered when answering would only be fear. Make a decision from values and allow people to have their reactions. Do not become cruel. Do not become careless. But stop treating every disliked version of you as a crisis that must be repaired. You are not here to be disliked on purpose. That is another ego game. You are here to stop being controlled by the fear of it. There is a difference. The goal is not to become difficult, harsh, or proud. The goal is to become grounded. Grounded enough to listen, grounded enough to adjust when truth requires it. Grounded enough to remain steady when someone's disapproval is not truth, but merely resistance to your growth. The version of you that needs approval will always panic when it is not liked. It will always run toward the nearest source of acceptance. It will always ask, "What must I become so they will approve again?" But the new version asks a better question. What must I remain, even if they do not? That question is freedom. Become calm enough to be disliked, calm enough to be misunderstood, calm enough to be criticized without collapsing, calm enough to lose approval without losing yourself. Because the moment you can remain kind, honest, disciplined, and steady without everyone liking it, you are no longer living as a servant to approval. You are living as a person with a center. If this message is giving language to something you have lived for years, share it with one person who needs strength without bitterness. And if you are ready to stop living as a servant to approval, stay until the end. Because the final transformation is where the old version finally loses its throne. There is a version of you that still waits at the door of other people's approval. It waits to be noticed. It waits to be invited. It waits to be praised, selected, remembered, forgiven, admired, or finally treated like it matters. It keeps looking outward, hoping someone will come and give it the feeling of worth it has not yet learned to build from within. That version of you may look patient, loyal, humble, or loving, but underneath it all, it is begging to be chosen, and that version cannot lead your life anymore. Because the person who begs to be chosen will always negotiate with his own value. He will accept less than he deserves. Because some attention feels better than none, he will stay where he is tolerated because being alone feels too frightening. He will shrink his standards to fit someone else's capacity. He will confuse being needed with being loved, being praised with being respected, being included with being valued. He will keep offering more of himself to people who have already shown they do not know how to honor what they receive. This is not love, it is hunger. A person who needs to be chosen is easy to keep uncertain. Give him a little warmth, and he stays. Pull it away, and he works harder. Praise him, and he opens. Ignore him, and he starts wondering what he did wrong. Give him mixed signals, and he begins performing for clarity. This is why the approval-seeking version of you must be destroyed. Not because it is evil, but because it keeps mistaking emotional crumbs for evidence that you are finally enough. The new version of you does not beg to be chosen because it has already chosen itself. That does not mean it becomes cold. It does not mean it stops loving. It does not mean it becomes arrogant, isolated, or impossible to reach. It means your self-worth is no longer waiting for someone else to unlock it. You can still care about people. You can still enjoy connection. You can still appreciate praise, affection, attention, and belonging. But you no longer treat them as proof that you have permission to value yourself. That is the transformation. The old version says, "Please see me so I can feel real." The new version says, "I will live truthfully whether I am seen or not." The old version says, "Please approve of me so I can feel safe." The new version says, "I will act from character even when approval is uncertain." The old version says, "Please choose me so I can stop doubting myself." The new version says, "I will not abandon myself just to be chosen by someone else." This is where Stoicism becomes more than an idea. It becomes a way of standing. The Stoic person does not place his worth in the hands of the crowd, the lover, the friend, the critic, the family member, the audience, or the passing mood of other people. He brings the question back to what is his. Did I act with wisdom? Did I act with courage? Did I act with justice? Did I act with self-control? Did I remain honest when approval tempted me to lie? Did I remain disciplined when attention was absent? Did I remain kind without becoming weak? Did I remain firm without becoming cruel? These are the questions that build a free person. The new version of you is not desperate to be understood by everyone. It explains when explanation is useful, then stops when explanation becomes self-betrayal. It does not chase people who only value it when it is convenient. It does not keep auditioning for people who are committed to withholding approval as a way to stay powerful. It does not treat rejection as a verdict on its worth. It treats rejection as information. Sometimes it reveals incompatibility. Sometimes it reveals someone else's limitation. Sometimes it reveals where you are still trying to earn belonging from people who were never meant to be your foundation. This does not mean rejection will never hurt. It will. Being unseen can hurt. Being misunderstood can hurt. Losing approval can hurt. But pain is not always a command to return to the old self. Sometimes pain is simply the withdrawal that comes from no longer feeding a dependence. The old version will still whisper, "Go back, explain again, make them like you again, become easier, become smaller, do whatever it takes to recover the warmth." The new version must answer, "No, I will not trade my character for temporary comfort." Here is the practical rule. Stop auditioning where you should be discerning. Instead of asking, how do I make them choose me? Ask, does this place allow me to remain honest? Instead of asking, how do I make them approve? Ask, do I respect who I become around them? Instead of asking, why did they not see my value? Ask, why am I still offering my value where it keeps being mishandled? These questions shift you from begging to choosing. Because you are allowed to choose too. You are allowed to choose the rooms that do not require you to perform. You are allowed to choose the people who respect your boundaries, not only your usefulness. You are allowed to choose the work that aligns with your values, not only the work that earns applause. You are allowed to choose silence when speaking would only be begging. You are allowed to choose distance when closeness keeps costing your dignity. You are allowed to choose yourself without making everyone else the enemy. The approval-seeking version of you will call this selfish at first, because it has confused self-abandonment with goodness. It believes that being chosen requires being endlessly available, endlessly agreeable, endlessly forgiving, endlessly impressive. But the new version understands that real goodness has a spine. Real kindness does not require self-erasure. Real love does not ask you to destroy your own foundation. Real humility does not mean kneeling before every opinion. You do not become free by forcing people to choose you. You become free when their choice is no longer the center of your identity. If they choose you, you receive it with gratitude. If they do not, you remain standing. If they praise you, you stay humble. If they criticize you, you examine yourself without collapsing. If they misunderstand you, you stay clean in your conduct. If they leave, you grieve if you must, but you do not follow them by abandoning yourself. That is the new version. It is calm, because it is no longer living like every reaction is a judgment from heaven. It is steady because its worth is not built on applause. It is loving because it no longer needs love as a drug. It is strong because it can be disliked without becoming false. It is free because it has stopped asking the outside world to give permission for an inner life. So destroy the version of you that still needs their approval. Destroy the part that performs for praise, bends for acceptance, panics at rejection, and mistakes being chosen for being worthy. Destroy it through discipline, through truth, through private standards, through self-respect, through the courage to be misunderstood and still remain aligned, and then build the version that no longer begs to be chosen, the version that chooses character before applause, values before attention, self-respect before comfort, and truth before approval. Not because people do not matter, but because your soul matters too. Not because love is weak, but because love without self-respect becomes dependence. Not because approval is evil, but because no outside approval should ever become more important than the person you have to live with when everyone else leaves the room. The version of you that needs approval will always live carefully. It will measure every word before speaking, not from wisdom, but from fear. It will check every face, every silence, every reaction, every change in tone, searching for permission to feel safe. It will make your life smaller so fewer people can reject it. It will call that peace. It will call that maturity. It will call that being easy to love. But deep down, you will know the truth. You were not being free. You were being managed by the fear of disapproval. That version of you may have protected you once. Maybe it helped you survive rejection, criticism, loneliness, or conditional love. Maybe it taught you how to read rooms, how to avoid conflict, how to become acceptable enough not to be hurt. But what helped you survive cannot always be allowed to lead your life. At some point, the same habit that protected you begins to imprison you. The same need that once made you careful begins to make you false. And now, it must end. Not through anger, not through arrogance, not by pretending you do not care about people. You are not destroying your kindness. You are not destroying your ability to love. You are not destroying your desire for connection. You are destroying the dependence that turns connection into fear. You are destroying the hunger that makes you trade your values for applause. You are destroying the weakness that makes another person's approval feel more important than your own conscience. Because approval is too unstable to become your foundation. People change, moods change, rooms change, opinions change. The same people who praise you today may misunderstand you tomorrow. The same people who enjoy your softness may resist your boundaries. The same people who applaud your growth may become uncomfortable when that growth makes you harder to control. If your worth depends on their reaction, your identity will never be steady. So build something deeper. Build character. Build private standards. Build the ability to tell the truth without needing everyone to reward you for it. Build the discipline to keep promises when no one is watching. Build the courage to be misunderstood without running back to explain yourself into exhaustion. Build the calmness to be disliked without becoming cruel, defensive, or false. Build the self-respect that stays with you when the applause disappears and the room becomes quiet. This is the Stoic path. Not to be admired by everyone, but to become governed by what is right. Not to have a perfect reputation, but to live with a clean conscience. Not to reject all praise, but to stop needing praise to know your life has value. Not to become cold, but to become rooted. Rooted enough that criticism can teach you without destroying you. Rooted enough that praise can encourage you without owning you. Rooted enough that rejection can hurt you without making you abandon yourself. The world will not always approve of your growth. Some people will miss the version of you they could use. Some will dislike the boundaries that protect your peace. Some will misunderstand the silence that keeps you from begging. Some will call your self-respect pride because they benefited from your insecurity. Let them have their opinion. Your task is not to control every mind. Your task is to control your conduct. So stop asking every person to confirm your worth. Stop adjusting your soul to fit every room. Stop performing strength when you need to practice it. Stop chasing emotional applause from people who cannot give you lasting peace. Stop treating rejection as proof that you are nothing. Stop kneeling before approval as if it is the final judge of your life. Choose character instead. Choose the quiet power of knowing you acted honestly. Choose the private respect of keeping your word. Choose the steady peace of living by values even when attention is absent. Choose the difficult freedom of being real over the comfortable prison of being liked for a mask. Choose the version of you that can stand alone without collapsing into self-doubt. Because the version of you that needs approval will always live carefully, fearfully, and dependently. But the version of you that lives by character becomes free, not because everyone accepts you, not because no one misunderstands you, not because rejection no longer hurts, but because you finally stop abandoning yourself to be accepted. And once you stop begging the world to choose you, you begin to understand the deeper truth. You were never meant to be built by applause. You were meant to be built by character. If this episode helped you see the version of yourself that must end, subscribe to Stoic Saga, like the video, and write in the comments, "Built by character." Let that be your reminder that your worth is not waiting in someone else's approval.